Welcome to the GameReady podcast, where former college and pro athletes share their stories, experiences, and the lessons that shape them on and off the field. From the highs of competition to the challenges of transition, we dive into mindset, resilience, and success beyond sports. Whether you're an athlete, coach, or fan of the game, this is your place to connect, learn, and get game ready for life. Let's get game ready.
Hello, everybody. This is the Game Ready podcast, and I have the pleasure of having a special guest. His name is Scott Powers. Scott was a baseball player in college, and we have some similar coaches in common. He went to the University of Maine, and that's where my first college football coach. He used to coach at the University of Maine, so it was a cool exchange when he told me about that. So I'm gonna let Scott tell you a little bit about himself, and then we'll move forward.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ernest. I appreciate it. Yeah, I grew up in Maine, so University of Maine had a good football team back then, and the coach went to Cincinnati, who Ernest played for us. That was kind of our main connection. Then I ended up going to Boston University. I ended up trying out for the baseball team there, and it was my sophomore year. I got cut. I made it down to the last cut. Left school, had sort of a year and a half gap where I went to work, was out of school, and ended up walking on to the Bryant University baseball team in Rhode Island. Mm-hmm. And so that was kind of my story. It was it really meant a lot to me. It was kind of like I told you early on, it was like my Rudy story. If you ever saw the movie Rudy, I was like, I'm going to play baseball, and I don't care what it takes. I'm going to be the first guy in and the last guy out, and I'm going to make it really hard for these coaches to cut me. And it worked. Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the main lessons, I think, as athletes and people, especially individuals who play beyond high school. You learn how to work in the process of work, and that's the most important part. And I'm looking forward to hearing the whole story within the frame of what we're going to talk about. All right, we're going to start off looking back at your college athletic career. What were some of the most defining moments, both highs and lows, that shaped not only you as an athlete but as a person moving forward?
Yeah, I think for me, first of all, just making the team was a really special moment. Like I went in second semester, so they had already had their fall season. So I went in, I was the only guy really trying out at the time. And again, my motto was, I'm not going to get outworked. No matter what happens, I'm going to be the guy. And no one said anything to me. So I just keep going to practice every day. And I know we have when you play baseball in the Northeast, mm-hmm. It's cold. You're practicing in a gym. And then the first trip is you go to Florida, and for your first games in Florida, you usually you get smoked because you haven't been on the baseball field. But the Florida trip's coming up. I'm like, man, what's happening here? I'm so afraid to talk to the coaches because I was like, if I talk to them, they're gonna cut me, right? So I was like, I'm better off if I just keep showing up every day. They can't cut me that way, right? So finally, the time came, and I go to the office, and coach starts talking to me like, sort of an evaluation, like, whoa. Like, am I on the team? And he looks at me like I'm crazy. Like, yeah, you're on the team. Like, I wanted to start crying in his office. I was so excited, and I did. I went back to my dorm room. I shed a few tears because it meant so much to me, and I'd come so far. I mean, I had a year and a half. It was a dream come true. I had a year and a half of like no school, working at a dead end job, right? Like just dreaming to get back to school, mm-hmm. Never mind playing baseball. And then Ernest, in the middle of all this, my dad's sick, right? So he is, turns out he has got a brain tumor and cancer. So in the middle of all this, right, it's like, man, I'm dealing with that. Like I'm on my own. I'm broke. My dad's dying, and like this is my lifeline. Like baseball is my lifeline. Yeah. So making that team was such a great feeling of like, man, I made the impossible possible somehow. Yeah. I willed it, right? And it was such a special moment for me.
That's huge. So that's a mixture of highs and lows. Yeah. How did that how do you believe that shaped you as a person? Like moving forward, how did that actually shape you as a person?
Man, I almost get like goosebumps, like
Yeah,
just talking about it. Because
yeah,
I mean, I was just a kid from a small fishing town in Maine, right? Like I was a nobody, wasn't a
yeah.
great high school athlete. I was average in all the ways.
Hmm.
And something about that experience proved to me that when you have the right work ethic and consistency and the mindset of belief, right, that anything's really possible. And
Hmm.
then what I took away when I left, got into the corporate world and got into business, I ended up starting my own financial business.
Smart.
Um, then into that, I got into acting in my 30s, which was, again, something that was really impossible. I wasn't an actor. I just
Hmm.
happened to stumble into something, had my heart broken, thought I'd
Yeah,
go try something new. And next thing I know, I'm in front of a camera with Matthew McConaughey doing a movie, right? And just there's something um, intangible that exists in this world, right? Whether it's belief, whether you're spiritual, religious, right? There's forces at play that we can kind of harness when we have the right mindset and the right attitude to
hmm,
really almost overcome, not only overcome anything, but create too.
yeah.
And that's what that process taught me. It was so powerful for me.
When you say created, that's the most important thing, and it filters into almost like you're forced to use your imagination to come up with solutions. And
Yeah.
once you connect it to, in my opinion, it's infinite. And then you kind of get the blueprint on how to handle tough stuff. You know, that
Oh
makes a
yeah.
lot of sense. That is cool. Um, how did those experiences actually prepare you for life after sports? I think you kind of dove into a little bit, but we can do a little bit more detailed storytelling of how those experiences prepared you for life after sports.
Yeah, man, so many different ways, right? I think one of the biggest things for me was as an athlete was being coachable.
Yeah.
And actually when I got into acting in my 30s. I already kind of started I owned my own financial planning firm at that time. So I was kind of young building it up. Like it was in early stages. I'd left a larger firm to go out on my own. So I
Mhm.
had that and I go in to start acting, which was again by accident. I was going to be a model, do it for fun, maybe get some girls on the side. You know what I'm saying? Like nothing serious. And then
Yeah.
I had taken a class with a Hollywood director, and there's a bunch of us in there, and he pulled me aside. He goes, "Scott, like I'm going to tell you right now, like you can do this. Like you're coachable, right?
Wow.
Like if I tell you to do something, you know how to do it." And I said, "I've been an athlete, my whole life." And he goes, "Oh, it makes sense because I can give you a direction, and you're willing to listen and do the thing." And
Yeah.
as athletes, that's what we do, right? Coach tells us to do something. If you don't, you're running laps. If you do, you're rewarded. And
Exactly.
yeah, so I think so that was one piece of it was being open to coaching, and I've had a lot of great coaches in my professional life and mentors, and I think that's one thing. Like with my coaches, I owe them so much. My college coaches they were hard on me at times, but they also believed in me, and I was willing to listen. I would have done anything, right? They told me to change my delivery, I did it, right? They
Yeah.
taught me a new pitch, I learned it, and I feel like that really came through professionally, where I had all these great mentors, and sometimes we can have great mentors and not listen to them, right?
Hmm.
But I
Oh,
think being able to be coachable has made all the difference in my life as far as any success I've had along the way.
that is huge. And having that experience in athletics, you actually see the real, true, good, great mentors. You get what I'm saying? Because you actually, if you've had success with a mentor before and something that you love to do, and you develop a interest outside of sports, and it's actually you can actually almost hone in on the mentors that are actually meant to speak to you, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? That experience actually gives you that. It gives you that ability to not listen to everybody. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah,
you really want to hone in on the people who actually they care about you. They care about where you're going, and they'll give you the tools to get you where you need to go. So I mean that's huge. That is
yeah, I
huge.
love it. So I had a pitching coach.
Hmm.
Man, he was the best. Coach O, Sean O'Connor. So it's funny, they're both still in coaching. Both my coaches were young at the time. John Sjogren, he's actually coaching at Rollins down in Florida still.
Oh,
Um,
really? Okay.
yeah, he was
That's
like national. He was runner up a couple years ago in the World Series, like national coach of the year. Great
that's
coach.
right around the corner.
Yeah,
It's not too
yeah,
far.
great coach there. And then Sean O'Connor was my pitching coach. He's at IMG Academy now as their varsity coach. Scouted for a long time. But I tell you, like, one thing I always tell about Coach O, right? Like he's the type of guy that would make you feel like you're the number one draft pick, even though I was probably like the worst player on the team, right? Talent wise. But because I put in the effort and the work, he's like, I'm going to make you better. I'm going to figure out a way to make you better. Then he treated me like I was one of the top players, right? And you talk about mentors and having those people that believe in you more than maybe you believe in yourself. I think it's so important to find those people in life,
Yes.
right? And one of my favorite stories, we were in Florida in Fort Myers on our spring break, and we're in this bar restaurant place, and all of a sudden, like, all these girls start coming over and talking to me, right? And like, I mean, I'm not the worst looking guy in the world, but I didn't have a lot of game either. But all these girls are coming over talking to me, and then they're talking about like, what am I going to do with them? Asking me what am I going to do with the money? I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, oh yeah, your coach just told us you're going to be the number one pick in the draft next year, and you're going to sign for like $5 million. He's like, and that's like, that was my coach in a nutshell, right? He's like, oh, Scotty, we're gonna pump him up, and telling these stories. Like, it was one, it was a lot of fun, right? It's a funny story, but two, is the type of people like he's gonna do the things to make you help you believe in yourself, because he believed in me, and I needed that. Like, I needed to feel like that someone believed in me in that moment, because I was doubting my own abilities, and I think we always ask ourselves, are we good enough, right? And those people will come across in your lifetime. You will come across those people, and like you were just saying, Ernest, right? Like knowing who to listen to and also who not to, but to find those people that believe in you more than you do.
Exactly. And I mean, that's a valuable gift that you can give anybody. And you actually learn how to be a better mentor yourself.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, no doubt. So I started coaching kids. I got two boys. I have one is 22, the other was 17. Both of them, I coached both of them in baseball until they were 14 years old. So I spent 15 years coaching youth sports. And let me tell you, I took those lessons and applied them to the kids.
Oh yeah.
Right. Who I coached and mentored. And a lot of them still call me coach today. I'm still coach, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, and we won a lot of games. We had a lot of success, and a lot of it was me pouring into them. Even the kids that were like me and my Bryant team. I wasn't the best player, but I had those moments because a coach believed in me. So I took that, and I won a lot of games with, sometimes I want to say like the least talented kid on the team would come through in the right time, and it's just because we just hammered over and over again that I believed in them, right? Like, I believe in you, I love you, and we're gonna do something together. And today may not be the day, but it's coming, right? Your moment's coming.
Yeah, I think, man, that actually adds years to your life. When you pour into other people, I mean, you get it back times 10. And it's so. I have relationships with like a few of the young people I've coached. And I'm actually going to a wedding of one of my my former athletes that I actually trained, and it's just cool to see the lessons that you have shared with someone, and to see them actually, do some really, really cool things, man. I mean, that's the beauty of coaching, especially with your kids. I mean, with your sons. That like goes into you doing something even more important than sports, is being a parent.
Yeah.
That's a huge, huge, huge bonus I think that sports give people. Just in the transition from being a college athlete, life beyond sports is, it's a major, major shift. What were some of the biggest challenges that you faced in that transition? Whether, and we'll cover like a few things, whether it be your identity, your career, your fitness, which is huge, and your mental health. What was the biggest challenge you faced in a few of those areas where your identity, your career?
Yeah, I mean, saying goodbye to the game was
Yeah,
really hard. I
yeah,
mean, that first season when you're not playing, when everyone else is playing and you're
yeah.
not,
Oh yeah.
it, man, it was like heartbreaking, right? I
Mhm.
want to be, and the worst part, I shouldn't say worst part. Worst part for me, my
Mhm.
team was really good after I left,
Oh boy.
right? So they went to the NCAA regional. We were
Oh
just on the cusp a couple of years prior. So they got over the hump. They were in the regional. They're
wow.
all my buddies, right? My good friends, and I got to watch them the sideline. I just want to be in the dugout, right? I just want to
Yeah.
be with them. And then those seasons, right? Like Ernest, for you, I'm sure when the fall comes, like there's football in the air, right?
Oh man. Yeah.
Yeah. When
Yeah.
spring comes for me and the grass pops, is like it's baseball season. And then
Yeah.
to not play was really, really difficult. I mentally to overcome that. And I noticed my older son, he played in college for 2 years, Division II at Azusa Pacific, hurt his elbow,
Oh,
decided he's not going to continue. And then last year was his first year without baseball, and it hit him. Right, so I'm
oh,
watching this through a parent's lens, knowing what I went through, watching him go through it. And yeah, so I think that part's just hard because it's so much of our identity. We put so much time and effort in as athletes, dedicated to this one sport. Then it stops like
yeah.
this, right? It's gone.
Yeah. It's done.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
what what did you what were some of the conversations that you had with your son when it was all over that possibly could help him with the transition and make it a little bit more easier or palatable?
yeah. Well, actually, one we were priming it. So I even when I coached my kids, even on their little league teams, I would tell them enjoy this because you don't know when the game's going to stop.
There.
For some of you, this may be it. This may be your last year you don't play. For some
Mhm.
of you, it could be 10 more years. And if we're lucky, you get to play till you're 40, right? And get paid big bucks, right? Very few of us get that.
True
But you
indeed.
just don't know when that's going to end and try to enjoy the process as much as possible. You
Mhm.
can say those words, it still doesn't help.
Nope.
Uh, and so what I had to talk to my son about a little bit when we were talking about it was one, he still had a window if he thought about trying to play again, but is being good with that decision, right? Like you still have a little bit of control here and how you want your story to end.
Mhm.
And then at the same point, it does stop for everyone and life does go on,
Yeah.
right? And it's just like there's sort of an acceptance of you've done everything you can do, right? Your body doesn't want to do this anymore and being grateful for the journey and the process you went through and what have you learned from being an athlete like we're talking here, like
Mhm.
what have you learned and what can you take away and then what can you carry with you and pass down at some point. Like I hope he's a great little league coach. I know he will be. He's so damn smart. But it's like what can you now you have all this information and knowledge, pass them down to your little brother, right? Or pass or coach a team or and then for me, that's what I did. I got into coaching even before I had kids. I was helping out with the little league.
Mhm.
I did Special Olympics at one point, and then when my kids were, 5 years old, I was like all in, like drinking the Kool Aid of, coach dad, and I would say I even sacrificed, work to some degree to be with my kids in the field. I had to
Oh.
make those career decisions. Like, yes, I could have made more money, but
Mhm.
what I got with my kids is way more valuable, right? Those memories and that time spent with them, way more valuable.
Big time, man. And um, that is that's the hardest thing is to be able to to be able to separate your identity from the sport you played. That's the hardest thing to do. I know I've dealt with that in it's I used to tell people I didn't even play football when I stopped playing. Yeah, I didn't even want to I didn't want to have the discussion. And, I didn't really watch football for like several years after I retired because I had it's like I had a sense of a loss in my who I was, and I had to come up with that. And actually, coaching helped me come to terms with it and helped me pass on a little bit of the knowledge that I gained while I played. So I understand, how your transition and how that actually helped you, which is huge. How do you think that was there a major shift? Did you have any kind of issues with like with mental health? What was your story behind it, actually managing the mental aspect of of managing the disappointment, the I don't want to say depression, but the like you lost the game that you really truly love.
Yeah, I think for me, one thing I did after college, and you mentioned this a little bit earlier about identity, was I was still an athlete, right? So I trained like an athlete. It didn't stop me. I didn't, I went trained really hard. Like I was
Mhm.
lifting, I was running, I would do sprints, and I still do a lot of that stuff now, even at 51.
Mhm.
I don't want to be average, right?
Oh, yeah.
I still want to be an athlete.
Oh, yes.
Um, so I'm still the old guy at the football field trying to do it. I call them sprints. It probably doesn't look like sprints to other people, but I'm trying to get out there. Um, but I actually probably overtrained after college, and so I threw myself into training, working out, running, ended up doing a marathon. But I overtrained for a while. I threw myself into punishing my body as a way to compensate for what I was missing. That makes sense, right? So like I still did softball. I played, softball leagues, and I played a lot of basketball. It's like a couple of basketball leagues, and I love that kept my competitive juices going. But I think I was really competing with myself, and I was so scared to lose my edge of like, that was the last piece. I mean, I loved the process of training my body, right?
Mhm.
Because
Oh, yeah.
no one was going to out train me, Ernest, right? It was
Oh,
like, I was in such control of that, and I didn't want to lose that. But I feel like if I was smart and had to go back, and I think there's a question had on your, things we were talking about, was that I'd probably tell myself, hey, you need to rest more. Like, you can't keep up this pace just because,
true.
I want to still be an athlete. I just didn't have an outlet for all my stuff. But I was really hard on my body and hard on myself for a number of years after college. That
Oh,
makes
yeah.
sense.
Oh, it makes a huge that makes so much sense because I've had to rethink how I view training myself because I did the exact same thing. I had to learn, but I got lucky, and I still dipped where I was overtraining after I stopped playing. But 2 years, about 4 years before, I discovered recovery. I discovered how important recovery was. And I understood that in order for you to get the benefit of the training, you have to let your body adapt to the stress. So that's a huge issue that all athletes come to grips with. And some people just stop even training at all because they remember how hard it was. So they don't even want to. They don't want to go anywhere near a gym because they think that they have to train at that level. You know what I mean? And they just lose it. So I've lost a lot of teammates because of that. So
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's something I never connected until we just had this conversation right now. I didn't know that was a thing.
Oh, it's huge.
Yeah,
It is
wild.
huge. It's huge, and I really, along with this podcast, I own a gym, and one of the main things that I wanted to actually focus on was to actually reach out to ex college athletes who just stopped working out because of that mental block and that limited outlook on what fitness is. Fitness is not just, training is not just you preparing for an event. Training is for you understanding how to use your body, especially after all the reps and all the heavy things that you've done in your younger. Your body's gonna change, and actually working out, if you want to say that, helps you keep an eye on your body and gives you an idea. Hey, I can, I know where my body's changing. I know how I can actually adjust things, and and you can come with a formula that actually works to keep you physically active, and that will help you prepare for just you wanting to run a marathon if you want to, if you want to, go and, become some sort of, power, not I shouldn't say power lifter, but something physically active. You can actually do it in a way where it doesn't put you at detriment, or you just stop doing it. So, and if that made sense, man, I mean, I'm real passionate about that, because I've seen people just stop training and stop working out altogether.
Yeah, I love that. I'll be honest. I mean, I think it took me 20 years to get comfortable just going for a walk.
Oh, I'm telling you, yeah.
I mean, because I was gonna go hard, right? It's like you don't walk, you run. Like, wow, walking's for like sissies or something. I don't know. It's like,
Yeah.
and I had a really hard time like dialing it down and being okay with that.
Exactly.
Because obviously, and two, as we get older, our bodies can't handle that kind of load. I could get away with it in my 20s and even most of my 30s, and then I got into my 40s. It's like, whoa.
Oh, I'm telling you.
Yeah, different story, right?
Yeah, you feel it 2 days later.
Yeah.
That's my tale of the tape. So I mean, that is a huge piece that I want to address also. Is really, man, and taking the principles of you staying physically fit and active in your younger years, and just adjusting those principles to fit your lifestyle now. Don't be afraid to work out just because you think that you're not going to do enough. That's a huge thing. I walk as much as I can now. I was the same way. I used to think I had to run. No, I don't have to run. I can walk and get the same benefit out of it, because I know that I'm going to do it consistently. So
yeah, I mean, I still feel that even with my weight workouts, where it's like,
oh yeah,
if I can't put the hammer down for an hour, I'm not going to do anything.
yeah.
Scott, just go into the garage and throw some weight around for 20 minutes, right? It's like I still struggle with that, because it was so hardwired in me for a very focused period of time, and then I continued it. So there's something in my system that just can't let that go. I fight with myself on it. Like, dude, why can't you just throw down 100 push-ups throughout the day, right? Like,
yeah.
if I know I'm not, it's like, no, it's almost like this rigid, like, if I can't get to the gym, I'm not going to work out at all. It's just like hard or nothing. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not a bad thing. It's just a way to manage it. To manage it and put it in perspective of, hey, I'm not really preparing for something, but I like challenging myself physically, which is huge. That's huge. How did you navigate those? I mean, I think we've already covered this. What advice would you give other athletes, when they're transitioning from sports, like you did your son? Going through the same process. How would you tell them how to navigate it? How would you put it in just simple terms, how to navigate that transition from playing college sports at a high level to just normal life?
Yeah, I think it's focusing on what have you gained versus what have you lost.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something special about being an athlete. I mean, just being a college athlete at any level, I think it's like 1 or 2% of all high school athletes become college athletes.
Yeah.
Right. And the numbers to go pro are minuscule from that. Right. So you're already elite just by getting to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
And the mindset to get there, and Ernest, I don't know if you felt this way. There were kids in my school that didn't play baseball that were way better than me. That would have taken my spot in a heartbeat. They didn't have the mentality. They didn't have the mindset. They weren't willing to grind it out and go through the pain, the suffering, the early morning practices, the workouts, right? The cold day, the days when it's 30 degrees out and you got to go throw a ball.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't willing to do that. And that's life, right? So most of life is if you show up and consistently and are willing to do the things other people aren't willing to do, you will win.
Yes.
And so I think understanding what you've gained from your sport, your experience, no matter what sport you do, versus like what you've lost. I think that's the first thing. And I find this, no matter what I also coach men in relationships, do some relationship coaching.
Wow, that's huge.
And I feel like the biggest thing a lot of couples miss is gratitude, right? It's what are we are we focusing on what's wrong? Or are we going to focus on what we're grateful for? And we can find those things that we're grateful for in our partner, in life away from sports, and just being grateful for that journey, that we did something really special. And one thing I have a hard time with just this generation. This is the old man version of me, right? But Instagram, TikTok, it's all about the highlight reels, the signing day, right? And what about the kid that walks onto a D3 school, or me, like a D2 school, throws on a uniform, has an amazing career, right? And that's 95% of college sports. And I feel like it's lost in a lot of these kids now, because they want the big signing. They want to go D1 and have the big signing day, and all the glitz, and be able to throw it up on Instagram. And my son struggled with this a little bit. He graduated 21 from high school. So we're in the middle of COVID. No one had roster spots, right? So recruiting was really hard. And he did find there's a great world-class D2 program here that really liked him, and it was a good fit. But I could feel from him his desire to, he wanted to commit. He just wanted to have that like certainty.
Oh yeah.
And I've seen some kids. One of his buddies now is a D1 catcher, and he worked his way up from community college to D2, then transferred again. Now he's D1 and he's crushing it, right? And he wants to go pro, and he had that he didn't care. It was more, for him, that journey was more important than the signing day. If you know what I'm saying?
Yes, which is he's going to play professionally more likely with that mentality.
He might, yeah.
Yeah, he
A friend of mine got drafted last year with the Padres. He's a great story. He was a D3 catcher. Again, COVID, not all places to go. Went D3 for a couple of years. Then he went to UC Santa Barbara. Then he got drafted last year, right? And he's getting paid. And yeah, the beginning of the journey didn't look like he wanted it to. The end sure has, right? And I feel like right now we get locked into that short-term gratification, like the dopamine hit, and we lose sight of what college sports really is. It's not NIL money, it's not it's not like the big Instagram stories. It's about going out and being a great teammate, having fun with your teammates, accomplishing a goal together, a conference championship, or whatever it is, NCAA. I mean, and those are things that are special that we take with us. And I think maybe that's us as sort of elders, right? And our wisdom is to remind them hey, this is about your journey. You're going to grow as a person playing sports. That's the end of the day. Has nothing to do with NIL championships. There will be a few people who are really lucky to experience that. For most of us, it's throwing on a uniform and having great teammates and great memories and pushing ourselves and expanding what we're capable of. Right.
Exactly. I think that is the true value of playing beyond a certain point. You learn the value of work. I used to tell kids, when I used to train kids really heavily, I was like, your first goal should be to be a starter on your high school football team, or your high school team. Forget all the signing days and all, and now NIL, which I'm totally for NIL. NIL is very important, but I think that the actual journey to become a college athlete and make it through being a college athlete into adulthood is more valuable than any amount of money you can make. I will say that to the end. The valuable experiences, the experiences that you gain from actually learning how to be structured in your formative years as an adult, your early 20s, learning how to actually manage yourself with different personalities, having the good experiences with teammates, creating memories that last a lifetime. That's priceless. That is a priceless part of being a college athlete.
Yeah. And even, being a student, right. And,
yes.
and managing your time and fitting in practice and school. And I had a part-time job back then too, and I did it all. I hear some of these kids complain like, I got a few classes or I'm like, man, you have no idea what I went through, to be a college athlete. Like, it was hard. And we're on the bus for 4 hours, 5 hours in between game, 3 hours one way, 3 hours back. I mean, it's a lot, right? And you learn to manage, like you learn how to condense time.
Yes, you do.
Right? Like stay and get really focused to get your things done, and which is so applicable to life, right?
Yeah. Oh, big time. I probably wouldn't be able to do what I do if I didn't have that regimented mind to have a somewhat of a plan every day when I come in here and I start my day. And every day is a routine that that I've developed from playing college sports. It actually helped me immensely. I mean, I think we covered you training as an athlete, and and the adjustments that you've made. Athletes, often develop a strong sense of discipline and teamwork, like we've been talking about, and resilience. How have you applied those skills to your current career and in business, coaching in leadership positions positions that you've held, and how have you applied those skills in your personal growth? We'll just handle it in your business first.
Yeah. I love what you're just saying this a second ago, right? It's like being able to work with all different types of people. Like when you get dropped into it as a teammate, you don't get to choose all your teammates. No. So you got to figure out how to work with most of them. So, there's always one or two that maybe you never get along with, right? But I would just call it out. I was a white kid from Maine, from a town that was like 2% minority, right? Yeah. So I'm getting dropped into a team, and I'm, you're learning how to deal with all different people from Bronx, New York, right? People from really upscale neighborhoods in Connecticut, like from Southie Boston, right? So we're different economic scales, different different races, and I've never experienced that before growing up or very little, I should say. So you learn about these different parts of. One, it's an eye opener, the different parts of people, right? Like the diversity of people, and learning what makes people tick and how to connect with them and how to be a great teammate. And I think I've always been predispositioned to have optimism in me. I'm a glass half full guy.
That's a beautiful thing, man.
Yeah. And I don't think I realized this until a little bit later in life. But I'm always trying to connect, a connector. So I want to connect with people. I find them interesting. I want to learn how to be friends with them. And I always feel like the best teammates are the ones who pump you up, right? So I wanted to be that. I may not have been the best player, but I was a great teammate. Yeah. I would get fired up for my teammates, and I was the first guy out of the dugout, to cheer them on. Mm-hmm. And as you get into the professional world, like being a great teammate goes a long way. When you want to connect with people and get the things you want to get done, right? You got to get people on your side, and you got to learn how to do that, because, you can be Michael Jordan and be the best player. Was he the best teammate? Probably not, right? Like in some ways he elevated his teammates. In other ways, he was almost like too good, right? He didn't need them. Yeah. In the business world, you need people on your side, and if your ego gets in the way, it becomes really hard. So for me, I feel like being a great teammate in professionally, and then, even in my leadership roles outside of work, I ran our little league. I was president of the little league, right? It's like getting people to come together for a common cause, right? And that is your team. So, I feel really strongly about that. Like that is an intangible skill that athletes carry, and it's a competitive advantage for the rest of your life.
Big time. Do you think that those skills were already there when you were going into college, or did you develop them as you were in college and after college?
I had some of that beforehand. I think what college did for me was open me up to, hey, this person is different than me, right?
Yeah.
I remember having this kid from the Bronx, and he was, he talked different, right? His attitude was different, and
Mhm.
I was like, this guy's full of it, like I started having to realize, like, okay, we're different. Doesn't mean he's a bad person.
Mhm.
And I got to figure out how to connect with him
Yeah.
because, like I'm going to go to him versus like him go to me. That was always my thing. Let me adapt. Let me ask questions, get curious, learn a little bit more about him. And he was younger than me. So I ended up becoming a little bit of a mentor over time.
Wow.
But at first I didn't really accept him. Right. And so I realized with getting in college and having more diversity in my teammates from whether it was, race, whether it was social, whether it was economics, right? You just learned I had to become more accepting
Oh yeah.
to be teammates. And I feel like that's what the college experience taught me was it just opened my eyes to different parts of the world, or I should say, the country and people.
Yeah.
And,
Seriously.
we're all coming together and we're all trying to play baseball. And 98% of us they're all good people, right? It's just like, can we connect and be great teammates together?
Yeah. And you had a common goal. Everybody wants to be a part of something that has a common goal. And and that's the value of sports. I think that's huge. That is huge. So that actually helped you out in your leadership and your personal growth, everything, as you matured into who you are today.
Oh yeah.
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 I think that was a big piece of it, man. I mean, I was telling you, I'm just going to go back to the beginning too. And just the whole experience just taught me again, like what's possible out there. Just a quick story. Like I had my best moment was my junior year. Like, I hadn't played all season long. We're getting like almost halfway through the season. We're into like end of March.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't played yet, but I've been working really hard. And I know that my pitching coach is trying to get me in, right? Like trying to find an avenue. And there's a room where I was going to start the next day. We're playing a big rival of ours in Massachusetts outside of Boston.
Mm-hmm.
The wind's blowing out like crazy. So home runs are going out left and right.
Mm-hmm.
And then just as we lost the lead, the wind shifted and started blowing in, right? So
Wow.
it was like a softball score, like 15-13 or something.
Mm-hmm.
So wind starts blowing in. We lost we're down, and of course we can't make it up, and we lose. And the coach, he's irate, right? We lost this big game, we blew it, like typical, like he hates losing. And he brings us in the huddle, and he's like, all right, we have we're playing at Providence tomorrow, and my nickname in college was the Big Puma. That's what my coach would call me.
Oh, good. Okay.
Because I used to be able to run a lot. I wouldn't say I used to run for a long distance very fast. I was probably a better cross country runner than baseball player.
Okay.
But for whatever reason, the nickname stuck. I was a Big Puma. And he's like, hey, Puma's getting the ball tomorrow and I expect a shutout. I hadn't pitched all year, right? So I'm like, a shutout, I just kind of giggled a little bit. It was like, it seemed crazy to me. Mm-hmm. And he is dead serious. And he goes, you think I'm fucking kidding with you? I'm kidding with you. I'll give the ball to someone else. I was like, I'm not saying a word, I was like, oh man, like, all right, it is real. It's on.
Oh, wow.
And so I went out the next day. It was like 30 degrees out, typical like New England weather. Snow. We got snow flurries. I'm on the field at Providence College. We're playing another school, but I went out there, man, and I threw a complete game. I didn't get the shutout, but I threw a complete game.
Wow.
And I walked off the mound. My teammates mobbed me. My dad's dying at the time, right? So like my teammates feel it. They mob me, and I can feel it, like even getting emotional. Almost 30 years later.
That's huge, man.
Yeah, because I called my dad. Yeah, and just told him I did it.
That is man. That is wonderful, man. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he passed a few months later, but
I'm sorry to hear that.
But it was so special, man. Like that, what baseball gave me, it gave me that moment, right? And it's like, how can you put a price on it? I mean, and to achieve that and to do something like that special. I think I told you I've kind of had a screenplay in the works.
Yeah.
Because when I wrote out this story, like actually, man, I burst into tears. I wrote this like 6 years ago. I wrote out the whole story. I posted it. It kind of went semi-viral. Mm-hmm. And it was living inside of me, like just like the emotion you see now, right? It's like
Oh yeah.
it's still there and just came out of me. And it's like it's really hard to articulate like what that meant. And again, I'm just some kid on a Division II team that no one cares about, right? But that moment changed my life.
Wow. That's huge.
Yeah,
Man, those are the lessons and the stories that will help people understand that, man, you learn so much more than just X's and O's and strategy beyond sports, man. Sports are essential to helping you share something just wonderful with people that you love. It extends, you know, it goes beyond anything that I can even attest to actually unite people and bring people together and have that, for you to share that with your dad, that I mean that's beautiful, man. I'm trying not. Everybody who knows me knows I'm a crybaby. If my daughters see this, they like,
yeah,
what? I know he's about to cry, but I'm the same way. Hey, Scott, man, hey, that's one of the main. That was like the best story that I've heard so far. I mean, I'm happy you got a chance to share that.
yeah. I mean,
That
I appreciate the opportunity to share it, man. Like, and it's kind of funny because I didn't even really think about it ahead of time, like throwing that story out, and it still grabs me, like, man, that was 29 years ago, right? And that's the impact that's still that's carried forward to this day. And I love what you're doing with this podcast. And I know when we first connected, we're like the same age and kind of
yeah,
been
man.
through the same thing. We have the same aches and pains, and
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
yeah. So I was really excited to do this because I love. There's not many times we get to talk about these things, right?
Oh,
Like
I
I don't
know,
get to tell that story very often, but it's one of the most powerful stories of my life.
and which is powerful. Then I'm telling you that story. When people see this, you know, that story is going to move people, and it actually is going to help people more than just seeing hearing, how you were able to share that moment with your dad. Everything in that moment, all the hard work, all the struggles, it was all worth it just to share that moment. I mean, that's huge.
Yeah.
So I mean, you develop we're gonna talk about your mindset and how that was developed through athletics. Share, some of the moments over the last, I say, like 15, 20 years where your athletic mindset gave you an edge in in your leadership roles, your regular, everyday life, your professionally. How did that athletic mindset give you an edge?
Yeah, I think one is endurance.
Mhm.
Like for me, I know if I'm in a competitive environment, I'm gonna outlast.
Oh yeah.
Right? I can just keep going. I'm really hard to kill, right? So
Yeah.
like whether like that mindset of consistent for me, like consistently showing up every day, doing the things you got to do, and just being able to endure and outlast. And again, for most of sports, for me, that was half the battle. You got to survive the cuts. You got to survive like the early
Sure.
practices and also and to get to game day,
Yeah.
right? Like
Oh
that's
yeah.
all that stuff that goes in, and then their uniforms just put it is a reward,
Hmm.
like the game day. Um, so I think that's a part of it, and learning new skills and being uncomfortable,
Hmm.
learning things, and the jump from high school to college was immense, right? Like the
Big time.
amount of skills I needed to learn to get up to speed with my teammates was a lot, and it was really uncomfortable. But that's growth, right? You don't grow in comfort. You grow when you're uncomfortable and on the edge of your
Yes, sir.
capability.
Yes, sir.
So I to me, those are probably the two biggest I wouldn't say shifts, but predominantly that have come from sports is, you know, endurance, being uncomfortable, the willingness to learn. And I almost think there's a quiet competitive, I don't love contrived, like when people are like in sales, like, oh, contrived competitive nature. It's in
Oh,
me, but I don't like when other people put it on me, but there is a quiet confidence that comes
oh
from
yeah.
like, I'd say this, even when I got into acting, like I was a newbie and I didn't act in high school. I didn't do plays. I just kind of jumped in, and I had
Mhm.
people I was competing against who'd gotten like acting degrees from these fancy schools, right, and like Berkeley and stuff. And
Mhm.
but I knew what I had, right? I had this quiet confidence, and internally I was like, I'm going to eat your lunch. You may not know it yet, but I'm taking this from you,
Go.
And so I had the desire to compete almost against myself to get better, right? I want to be better, and had that, and it developed that quiet confidence. So it was like, okay, I know how to do the reps. I know how to practice. I'm not going to just show up because we don't do that in sports. Like,
Mhm.
so I'm not going to do it here either. Right.
Oh
So,
yeah.
and I feel like I made a really fast jump in the acting world. I was doing commercials. I'd been some movies. Um, I did a Super Bowl commercial, Visa NFL commercial. It all
Oh,
happened in a really small period of time because I feel like the mindset I had developed being an athlete.
oh yeah. And people see that.
Yep.
People see that confidence, and that's something that in a lot of ways athletes either use or they lose. And that is a hard thing to deal with when I see an athlete or somebody who's played it to a certain level and they just lose their confidence. Because I've lost, I have had periods where my confidence is dipped, and actually going back and like saying, "Hey man, I've been through tougher stuff than this. I can handle this." I used to wake up at 4:30 in the morning doing mat drills. Nobody else I know has done that. So I know I can. Hey, me going in here and talking to my president about possibly a issue at work. I can handle it. Not to make it, not to contrive it, make it contrive, but you know how to handle tough things, and you develop a grit that most people don't. They don't have the opportunity to see and compare, past experiences that you've had. So I mean, that's huge. Uh, if you can go back and give advice to your younger self, the version of yourself that was training, competing, and striving to succeed in college athletics, what would you say?
Uh, Probably the same thing I'd say now is just go easier on yourself.
There you go.
You
Yep.
know, it's not is man, like Ernest, you're just talking like the confidence thing, right? It's like because we have in some ways develop a higher standard for ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
the falls becomes a little bit harder.
Big time.
And so I noticed, when I remember being in college and I'm 6'1", I was 185, 190 chiseled, right? I'm like, should have been as confident as could be. And if I look back now, I was like, oh, that guy, why were you doubting yourself, right? Like
Exactly.
at the time, I remember like quite, doubting myself and playing sometimes with fear instead of confidence. And I try to tell that to my boys, my older one, man, he was a beast. He has that competitive DNA. You can't teach.
Yeah.
The younger one's a little bit more cerebral, and I'm just like, dude, can you give me a fist pump once in a while? Show me, like he just got to have a big jam pitching yesterday, and he's like, it looked like he was going to the closet to get some snacks. It's
Oh
like
yeah.
same. But at the same time, it's like it's like that confidence. Like the difference between playing not to lose and playing to win is it's like there's razor edge, and I don't know where that line starts and where it
Mhm.
ends, but when you know it, you feel it. And like you were saying that you were alluding to, you didn't say it, but winners win,
Big time.
right?
Oh yeah.
Winners win, losers lose.
Yeah.
But you can, as an athlete, you can feel that shift when you're like, oh man, I'm playing scared versus I'm playing to go cut your throat and win
Big
this
time.
game.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like if I had to go back in time, I'd give myself that pep talk, like, hey, play to win. You have nothing to be scared about, right? And that
Oh,
self-talk of like, love yourself. You just accomplished something great just being here,
yeah.
right? So you deserve it. Just
Yes.
stop questioning yourself and play to win.
That's huge. And I totally agree 100% with that. As soon as you start playing conservative, you play to lose, you're going to lose. You can't conserve. You cannot protect a win. There's no protection in winning. All it is risk, grit, and shoot a little bit of blessings and luck that will, give you a little bit of an edge. And I mean, you're a successful businessman. You sound like you have a really good relationship with your sons. I mean, you're batting 1,000. I'm pun intended. So you're doing good. I'm telling you, you're doing really good. This is like one of the best conversations I've had.
Oh man, that's awesome. I appreciate that.
This is huge. What lesson do you wish you would have understood earlier about sports and success and in life after sports? What lessons do you wish you would have understood earlier about sports?
I mean, I think it's a lot of it we're just talking about. I wish I had more of an edge earlier on in life.
There you go.
I found some of that later. Even after baseball, I found that playing, like basketball and some competitive men's leagues and stuff. But I've kind of found my edge after the fact, and I wish I had that earlier. Mm-hmm. I wish I understood that. I think I was still developing that and learning and how to harness it. Mm-hmm. Not like if you didn't have it, you wouldn't be playing, right? But there are times I wish I was like I was just played with more confidence and more reckless abandon, and and I don't know. I think that's the one thing I wish if I could go back in time, I would change.
See that?
Yeah.
No, go ahead. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I just feel like even though I have no regrets, right? I literally, my coaches would tell you, I tapped out every natural talent I could, but I still think I had some stuff left in my mindset that was untapped.
Wow. See that? The cool thing is you can pass that on to your boys, which is even, man, that is a huge gift in itself. I'm telling you. I mean, Scott, man, I'm not going to hold you too much longer. Tell everybody where they can reach you and about any new projects you're working on, and we'll sign off.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you can find me on Facebook. I'm just under Scott Powers. You can find this mug there and give me a follow. And I try to put out content. I did some goal setting workshops a few weeks ago for people. A lot of mindset stuff, and then we do focus on relationships. I've been doing relationship coaching for the last 6 years. So on, I'll still call it Twitter, but X. Yeah. You can find me at Scott Powers, Men Save Your Marriage. It's S Powers that be is my handle. So I always welcome people to follow me or shoot me a DM. I feel like at this stage of life, I'm growing in a lot of ways, but also giving back too, right? I think that's part of it, and building connections. And if we're not growing, we're dying. So I want to keep that going. Yeah.
I'd suggest everyone check out Scott's profile on Facebook. He has a wonderful story about his experiences with baseball and just in life. It's been one of the best conversations I've had so far, man. Scott, thank you for joining me. I hope to have you on, in the future, and as things develop, especially with your sons, I hope, I can get a little bit of an update, see how they're doing. I love hearing about athletes who are developing, and especially your son who is transitioning out of baseball. And I wish him the best of luck. I know he has a leg up on the whole process because he has you as his dad. So that's huge. That is huge. All right, this has been the Game Ready podcast. This is Coach E. Allen. We're going to sign off. Scott, thank you. And all of Scott's information will be in the show notes. You guys, you take care. Make somebody smile today.
That's a wrap for this episode of the Game Ready podcast. Thank you for tuning in and being part of this journey with us. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to like this episode, share it with a friend, and hit that subscribe button so you never miss out on future stories and insights from former athletes who've lived it. We appreciate your support. Stay locked in, stay motivated, and always stay game ready. See you next time